Ryan.
Today, we are learning basketball with Krishna Narsu, a former analytics consultant with the Dallas Mavericks, a contributor to Nylon Calculus, and also the creator of the LeBron impact metric with the BBall Index. And anytime you've used that fun trade machine over at Fanspo, that's how they decide if you made your team better or not, by using Krishna's metric. So, keep the fake trades coming. I think I made one yesterday just for the heck of it. So, it's always a fun time getting on the trade machine. So, how you doing today, Krishna?
Good. How about you?
Super excited to talk some hoops and dig into like what really goes into developing an impact metric. I've always found it super interesting. I've dabbled around with some like hustle stat, all encompassing metrics that can try to like find out some defensive impact, because that's kind of the last frontier with impact stats, it seems to me, is where we seem to have a pretty good idea in how players affect offense, whether it's scoring or passing, their positive impact on that end. But there's so many little things that go unnoticed on the defensive end that aren't captured in the box score, even with how reflective blocks and steals and deflections can be. There's so much more between like the contests that the cameras don't quite pick up, or just awareness, defensive feel, instincts, all this kind of stuff. And, the closest we can get is kind of comes down to the plus minus that a player leaves on the floor, like how positive they were on the floor. How many points did their team score over the other team while they were on the floor? And there's a ton of different impact metrics out there, but there's really not too many public ones. A lot of them have gone private. And, LeBron is one of the last ones standing out here that people can find over at BBallIndex.com. I'm looking at it now. You got the top 5 of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jason Tatum, Nikola Jokic, Franz Wagner, Luka Doncic. I mean, all a couple of stars to me, especially after Franz just hit that game winner last night against the Lakers with the step back 3. So super excited to dig into his game a little later. But, backing up a little bit, I was just wondering kind of what goes into developing a tool like LeBron and trying to come up with an impact metric in general.
Yeah, so good question. Actually, first I'm going to start off with, we actually have a multi-year version of LeBron. So, and I'll just kind of mention the leaderboard there. That one's got Jokic at number 1, Giannis, then Shai, and Anthony Davis, and then Tatum, and then Embiid, then Luka, then Mitchell, then Franz, and then Wemby. So that's your top 10. I was going to start out with top 5, and then I lost count there, and I was like,
just keep it rolling.
Yeah. So, anyways, the whole idea behind, and I'll also mention with LeBron right now, because we're so early in the season, it's kind of like we do a lot of things to stabilize it. We have like padding involved in it. We have so what padding is it basically it lowers a player's like stats to the average, and it finds like the kind of correct it finds the correct kind of value to regress it to the mean, right? So as an example, like so like points per 100 possession, points per 110 possessions could be it could be like, so you would multiply the player's points times like how many possessions, and then you would also weight it by like the league average points per 100 possessions by, usually it's like a fixed amount of possessions, could be like 200 or 300 or 500 or whatever. So all of the stats in LeBron are kind of stabilized that way. So that's one of the ways we kind of can indirectly remove outliers with, like, say somebody's played like 10 minutes and they're averaging like 50 points for 100 possessions, right? Like in 10 minutes, I'm going to say, oh, yeah, you might be able to do that. But, over a full season, probably not. Right. Um, so that is one thing that LeBron does. We also have luck adjustments. So basically, like, there's a number of things we do so that we can kind of filter out the noise early in the season. Like, especially with 10 games in, like, if you think of a player's 3-point percentage, you have some guys who are like good shooters, like a Tyrese Maxey who's shooting like, I think, like 28% from three, right? Do we really think he's a 28% 3-point shooter for the rest of the season? Probably not. So
Right.
this is where, and so it's going to kind of regress him up towards the mean. So we do stuff like that in LeBron, which makes it, I think, a little easier to publish that earlier in the season. But despite that, it's still kind of, if you look at the leaders now, it is a little bit team dependent. Like, you can see, like, most of the best players in LeBron right now are on really good teams. So like Cat is sixth in LeBron. You have J Dub on the Thunder, 10th. Mobley Allen are 13th, 14th. So like there's a lot of although a lot of these guys are actually just playing well, right? Like it's not that surprising. But or here's another one though that maybe would be is like Ty Jerome's 22nd, right? So that's the situation where maybe okay, he's on a really good team.
And he's shooting the lights out, from what I
And
understand.
he's shooting the lights out. I mean, he's actually just been awesome.
Right.
So,
So, the small sample also
small
affects
sample,
it too. I was just graphing some step back jumpers earlier, and you see like Steph Curry is 79% on step back so far this season. So,
yeah,
will that hold? Probably not. Like, will he be the
right.
most efficient? Maybe he could do that, but not quite in the 70s.
Yeah. And that's where a method like padding really helps. Like, I think if I'm not mistaken, for like 3-point percentage, usually what you do is you pad it with like, or you stabilize it or you regress it to the mean, however you want to kind of use that term with, I think it's about like, I want to say it's 260 3-point attempts or something like that. I have to double check that, but yeah, let me pull up that number so I'm actually getting the right one. It is it's 240 attempts. Yeah, so that actually gives you a good idea. Like, I don't think there's a single player right now with 240 3-point attempts. So that kind of gives you an idea that right now we're still in the portion of the season where basically everybody's 3-point percentage is like, you shouldn't necessarily trust it, right? Like it might change a lot. Yeah. So and then actually going into, so you asked me about LeBron. I wanted to talk a little bit about multi-year LeBron too, which I think, so that's our best estimate basically of how good a player is right now. Because as I mentioned to you, LeBron is just this season, and it's kind of based on like some of the team success plays a big role, right? But with multi-year LeBron, we're using multiple years of data, and essentially what multi-year LeBron does is, I'm sure people are kind of familiar with some of the other metrics, maybe like Darko or EPM. Multi-year LeBron's a little bit different in that it predicts the following next season of a player. So like so from today till like November 10th in 2025 or something. It's essentially predicting what a player's LeBron is going to be over that time period. And of course, like, I think the easier way to look at it though is like it gets kind of confusing to think of it that way. So the best way to look at it is it's just our best estimate of how good a player is right now. And it uses the like previous 3 years of LeBron, uses our offensive roles, It uses some of our other stats at Basketball Reference. So we have stuff like um, experience. Oh, sorry, people. Did I say Basketball Reference? BBall Index.
Hey, we've been using B-ball reference for a long time, so B-ball index, it's slip of the tongue. I mean, they've been around forever. I feel like I was using them in middle school to look up
Yeah,
numbers, so
yeah,
it's always on the back of the mind. Shout out B-ball reference, but we're on B-ball index right now.
yeah. um, yeah. So, anyways, yeah, use some of our other stats at BBall Index. Like we have minutes consistency, which just measures like how consistently you get minutes, right? So some players play a lot and play a lot every day. Other players have their minutes vary a lot because they're maybe the seventh or eighth man on a team. So, but the kind of main component is like the previous 3 years of LeBron, and we actually do it like offense and defense split out. So, um, yeah, so that's kind of simplest way to think of it is just like how good is the player on today, November 22nd, um, and that's what it's aiming to tell you.
Yeah. And you obviously have a background with programming, with coding to build these tools. Could you give maybe a basic kind of like guide to like how you might go about trying to build an impact metric for the coders out there trying to pick up a hint or two?
Yeah, I think the thing I honestly, the most important thing, so you have to think about the problem, like how you want to, which variables you want to use, um, and like variables meaning like different stats. So it could be like points, rebounds, assists. Those are like the basic box score stats. And then you now with all the tracking data, you have uh, tracking data stats like potential assists or drives or stuff like that. So kind of really think about which stats might be important for kind of predicting impact, right? Um, and then the other thing is like, I think it's super important to kind of test how your metric does, right? So, one of the important things with LeBron that I've done is like I've done a bunch of testing to see, okay, how well does it predict the following season? Um, in terms of like the overall team, like how well does it predict the following season's team's wins, right? Like if you want to just predict how each team's going to do at the beginning of the season, there are other ways you can do this. I think probably the best way would be looking at each individual game and seeing how well it predicts each individual game. So this is something you could do with multi-year metrics. That would be more useful there. But yeah, so I guess I would say kind of think about how you're going about um, estimating like uh, impact, right? So in terms of like what are some different stats that would be relevant? Like as I mentioned with the tracking data, we have so many stats now with like the tracking data and the box score and the play by play. So I think you have to kind of really think through that. And the other thing is like again, make sure you're testing how well your metric does. Like, is it a good metric? And then the other thing is like it has to pass the sniff test, right? Like I have actually developed. I have one metric that I developed a while ago, and it tested really well. But like it had some like really bonkers results, right? Like it had like I think like Clint Capella was like fifth one year or something like that, or like
Mhm.
so like you can't have a metric obviously where people are gonna look at it and be like that doesn't seem right,
Doesn't
right?
seem
So
right. Yeah,
yeah,
it
so
sounds like it was like the year with Harden and Chris Paul, maybe, where he was a part of that really nice lineup. If I had to guess,
yeah,
the Capella's year with the Rockets, like
uh,
maybe he popped off that one year because he got to play with two ultimate kind of setup man, and maybe
I think it
I
was actually the more recently. I want to say like
oh
the
it.
Hawks or something like
Okay,
that.
yeah.
Uh,
I forget the stat exactly, but he had like a career high in something playing off Trey Young. It was either like rebounds or maybe field goal
yeah,
percentage or something like that. But he did have hit some career highs. So shout out Capella, the ultimate
yeah.
lob man.
And another guy the metric really, really liked over, I think, like 21 and 22 was DeLon Wright.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so I've actually tweeted about the metric before. I think I called it lazy LeBron because it was basically the same idea, but it just didn't seem very good in terms of passing the sniff test. So,
Something
but
came up weird
it
about it.
yeah. Um, but it performed well, so that's always kind of weird.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sure there's like nuts and bolts you got to figure out with when you get one odd thing that pops up in the results. And that was kind of leading me to what I was wondering is like how do these metrics kind of affect your viewing process? Like when you're trying to have that sniff test, like do you have the LeBron results maybe in the back of your mind as you're watching, or are you watching and then you go and check LeBron and be like, that doesn't add up with what I was just watching?
yeah, it's a little bit of both. I think with like Nurkic was the guy last year who was really good. Where I think for me, I've you know like when I first saw it, I was like, that's kind of weird, right? But the thing with LeBron is you can always see why something is the case with like in terms of one of the things you can look at like on off. Often that's the case. Like I believe last year with the Suns, the Suns like really fell apart without Nurkic on the court, right? Um, and there are like different reasons for that. Um, and Yeah, so like you can usually always kind of figure out if you dig into it. Like another example here, and I think you wanted to touch on this a bit later was like Franz versus Paolo.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
We're digging into Franz Paolo. What? And we
yeah,
can hop in right now if you want.
yeah. So I mean, like LeBron likes Franz better, and it kind of has for I think the last few seasons, if I'm not mistaken.
And to be
Um,
clear, that's the LeBron impact metric. We don't know how LeBron James feels about Franz and Paolo.
yeah. Um, so yeah, so what we have up on the screen here, like we have Franz's playmaking and Paolo's playmaking talent from our website, and just to kind of be clear, we actually don't have right now. LeBron is kind of only using the box score stats. One thing I do want to eventually do is improve on it and start incorporating in some of our talent grades. But as an example for how you can kind of see maybe why Franz might be higher is he's got higher playmaking talent. And one of the things LeBron really likes is it likes players who are very good playmakers. You can generally see the leaderboard tool. I mean, you can generally see the leaders in our leaderboard tool. And they will tend to be pretty good playmakers. Like you will have Nikola Jokic is pretty much always leading. You'll see Luca's up there. Giannis is up there. So um, Tatum's up there. So generally, our generally LeBron does tend to flavor playmaking a bit more. Actually, more so. I mentioned all of those guys, and those guys are generally among the highest in any metric you look at. But like as another example, I think LeBron tends to like James Harden a little more than some other metrics. Um, and again, it's I think because of the playmaking. Um, at least that's kind of what I've always uh, thought about in terms of the why, because you can kind of see yeah, we're pulling up the data here. Um,
So here's some of the numbers you were talking about. You got
yeah,
some of the best, creators for others in the league, playmakers. You got Shea, you got Jokic, you got Franz and Luca, Tatum, Towns, D. Mitch, AD, Giannis. I mean, a lot of scores, a lot of defense as well. But There's Harden coming
And
in
there,
11th.
Dave Harden.
There's Sengun, something
Sagoon,
of
another good
a
playmaker.
hub, right? A half court hub in the post for Houston. Sabonis at 18th. I mean, they're all up. Brunson top 25, running with, and compared to like Cat is 6, and part of that is probably playing with Brunson, and Cat's their leading scorer right now. I kind of said before the season I wouldn't be surprised if Cat ended up the leading scorer in this group, only because he didn't get some of the best looks he's ever had in his career playing off Brunson, and having Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby on the wing, both kind of cover up a little bit defensively. I know Mikal's had kind of a struggling start to the year, but there's a lot of defense and toughness on this team, a lot of length, and having Brunson go from like having to score almost every time down and make the best of that roster versus now having all these different star talents and floor spacers to play with. You're able to set up Cat where now his impact is really high, possibly from all those other attributes.
Yeah, and I'm actually gonna pull up Towns' shot making stats from our site BBall Index, and I think well, once you see those, you'll be able to figure out. Oh, okay, this is why he's actually he's very high up in LeBron this year. He's just been one of the best shot makers in the league this year. Let's see, he actually ranks 6th out of all the players in the NBA this year in our overall shot making efficiency and overall shooting talent grades. So yeah. It's in the
Pulling
yeah.
it up here now for us.
Yeah. So
so here's Cat's profile.
Yep. So you can see here, very, very good at making shots.
Yeah, across the board. I mean, he was already one of the top scorers and 3-point spacing big man ever, and now he's getting to play with some pretty nice floor balance and a heck of a point guard distributor to set him up. So, the shot quality has probably gone up. Even
Yeah.
though I'd say that as I'm reading, he's got a D- in shot quality. But hey,
Well, that's part of the reason is shooting talent and shot making is going to be higher. Is like you're hitting difficult shots, right? So at an extremely high level. Yeah, actually, it's a interesting question on whether it has gone up or down from last year. I am pulling that up right now.
Sure, yeah, and obviously still a tough shot maker, like you're saying. So he's a high efficiency on the tough shots. So even though he might be taking tough shots, like he can make them, and that's what makes him like a heck of a post up threat and also a 3-point threat, a good driver, just some smart feel and seemingly scalable from like being one of the top scoring options to maybe just being one of the guys out there, but can still lead the team in scoring any given night, and has been all season.
Yeah. And also like in terms of like his overall efficiency, so I think he's got a 66.9% true shooting. And if you see that shot quality, right, you're thinking, okay, wow. So he is taking some harder shots and he's just extremely efficient. So
right.
Yeah, so he's not quite the playmaker that maybe a Jokic or Luka is in terms of, and that's probably why he's a little bit lower. But just that absurd shot making is one of the reasons he is the best player in the Knicks, at least for this year so far, and is why he's very high overall in LeBron.
And then going back to Franz and Paolo here, like it's been a constant kind of theme, especially on Magic Twitter. Like why is Franz's impact so much higher than Paolo? And you mentioned that he does have the higher playmaking here, and we kind of expected the maybe like the impact to go down a little bit now that Franz has a higher usage. He's been given a bigger role. Paulo's missed at least 10 games by now. And Franz has become the default number one option. And it took a few games for him to kind of find that rhythm and the team to finally decide, let's just hand it to Franz almost every play and let him run the offense, because he's a star level scorer and he's proved it this season, and also has developed as a passer. Like we saw it in the playoffs in the first round last year as well, where that was kind of more of a national stage where he can run the pick and roll. He's a 6'10" forward running pick and rolls with incredible touch near the rim. He'll run and throw these little flip shots in as he's gliding through the paint, like incredible footwork, and he's patient. He plays with his own speed, his own speed control, kind of that change of pace where maybe he'll throw the defender on the hip behind him with putting his defender in jail. Maybe he'll use the strong screen to, whether it's Wendell or Goga Batadze more recently, and just have a ton of room to work with. And even Mo Wagner off the bench, they have some good brother-to-brother chemistry when they're running two-man game. But, last night he just put up a career-high assist. I want to say it was 11 to go with his 30-something points. And, he was a clear, reliable scoring creator who can create good looks for himself and others consistently every game. And does that mean he's going to make every shot he takes? Of course not. But he can create a good look and draw fouls, an efficient shot, whether it's at the rim, a three-pointer for the team, drawing fouls for himself, and a little bit of counter fades to go with it. And I would add that the defensive impact is really what separates these two when it comes to the impact stats. That, he's almost an underrated defender. He's one of the top big wing defenders in the whole league. And so, when he does so many little things right on both ends of the floor that bring winning impact, that's where it's reflected in the impact numbers to me, versus Paolo can be a little more volatile, I guess. He'll take a lot more tough shots. He might get those big point totals. I mean, obviously he just dropped a 50-point game against Charlotte before he got hurt, and he seemed to be taking a little leap this year. But his performances can be a little bit more sporadic, where if he's not feeling it, he's taking a lot of tough shots. He creates good looks for his team as well, at the line, at the rim, passing out to shooters. But maybe it's a little bit less defensive impact and a little less consistency on the offense because of the tough shots that he's taking. And I wonder what you make of that.
Yeah. I actually, so I sent you a couple more.
All right. Let me pull these up.
Yeah. So I think one of the other things, so actually that's a good point about the defense. I was going to also briefly touch on the 3-point shooting. So I think one of the major differences from this year versus last year, right, has been Franz's improvement as a 3-point shooter. He's just been much better this year, right? And as a 3-point shooter, right? So I think, and that actually shows up in our off-ball gravity stats as well. Like you can see he is getting guarded kind of more closely. So we have a couple of gravity stats. We have an on-ball gravity stat, an off-ball gravity stat.
We got his playmaking. On-ball gravity is 99 percentile, A+, 2.58 value for on-ball gravity. And then off-ball gravity, also the 99th percentile, 1.93 value, another A+. So, I mean, as good as it gets on both ends. And, the big criticism was Franz can't shoot. He had a bad Game 7 in the first round of last year. He had a down year from 3. But, he's so good at everything else. He's still taking tough step backs. He proved it on the Germany team as well, that he can make these tough shots. It's almost a little bit like watching Luka, and maybe he had low efficiency at times. It's like he's not taking wide open catch and shoot threes with low efficiency. He's taking the hardest threes you can take, like on ball, step back, pull up threes. And he's always been high touch indicators with floaters at the rim, running little hook push shots at the rim, high efficiency in the other years, where it felt like last year should be something of an outlier. And this year he's showing, hopefully that's so, and he can finally shake this criticism a little bit that he can't shoot. Because if that's the biggest hole, to me, he was like a star level impact even when he wasn't hitting threes, or was just a lower percentage on it. So now that he's, bringing that three ball on high volume, off and on the ball, I mean, we're looking at a potential all-star, and maybe even higher if they remain a top 3 seed.
Yeah, and one of the things that's, I mean, you mentioned the taking these kind of harder 3-point shots, right? So one of the things that's kind of more important necessarily than like 3-point percentage is like how many 3-point attempts do you take, right? Like if you look at the players who are like the best 3-point shooters, these are guys who are taking like the most threes. They're taking like 10, 11, like Steph, right? Part of what makes them the best shooter ever, besides the percentage, because I don't like, he's not number one all time in career 3-point percentage, right? So like you'd be like, oh well, so if he's not number one, then he's not the best shooter, right? But no, of course not, right? It's because he's taking like 12, 13 threes a game on all sorts of different types of threes that he's the best shooter. So in a way, like in fact, volume is actually just kind of more important than percentage in terms of like a good shooter knows he's a good shooter if he's willing to take these difficult threes. And I'm actually going to shout out Owen Phillips, who had a really good visualization of that on in
The
his
F5.
on the F5. I'm sure you saw that. So so essentially, like the guys who get guarded more are guys who take more threes than the guys, like there's a higher correlation there than with like 3-point percentage. So again, Franz is one of those guys who's like taking more threes, more harder threes, right? So the percentage kind of matters less. And even so, like in terms of like just his improvement this year, though, like going from 28%, like if you are at 28%, okay, then like maybe it's a little, then it does matter a little
It's a
bit,
little
right?
worrisome. It's a little worrisome at
Yeah,
that
it's a
point.
little
And
worrisome,
and
but
yeah, like you said, like the defenders that like defense, it comes down to what defenses respect in terms
yeah,
of how they prepare. So like if you're taking one attempt and you're making 40% of them, that's nice. You're technically an efficient shooter, but defenses might not respect you if you're showing a hesitation to shoot and you're just shooting the one where you're super wide open and per game when someone else is taking 5 threes confidently at like 34% or something like that. Like they're more worried about the volume, and on the court they're most worried about the confidence. They want to, like, if you're a confident shooter and you splash a few in a row, they're going to start reacting, versus if you're just hesitating all the time, even if you technically are high efficiency in the box score, they're just not going to worry about you and almost dare you to shoot at a certain point. And that obviously has some results in lack of spacing versus how far you can stretch out the defense.
yeah, and I do want to go back to you had mentioned Franz and Paolo's defense, so I did want to touch on that briefly. So we have a number of different stats at BBall Index, and one of them is matchup difficulty. So Paolo's matchup difficulty is in the 36th percentile compared to Franz, who is in the 78th percentile. So what does that mean? That basically means that Franz has been guarding better players this year. He's taking on tougher matchups. He's guarding like maybe not the best defender on the opposing team, because I haven't checked, but I assume Jalen Suggs is probably among the highest on the Magic, and Isaac as well. But he's guarding tougher matchups in Paolo. And then the other important aspect of defense is obviously rim protection as well. And that area of Franz is not as good, but he grades out as well in our post defense metric. And actually, both Franz and Paolo are kind of not that great in our rim protection metric, but Franz is actually better. So this is actually kind of surprising. 39 percentile for rim protection for Franz versus 4 percentile for Paolo. That honestly seems surprising. That almost seems like there's a bug or something.
Yeah, I wonder what that could be. I mean, off the top of my head, they do have some other rim protectors, so maybe they're a little more focused on the perimeter side of things. They're at the 3 and the 4 most often, and they're normally playing with a Wendell Carter, a Jonathan Isaac, a Goga Bitadze. So maybe those bigs are kind of eating up a little bit more of the blocks, and even Jalen Suggs is a super strong rim protector. And yeah, I would imagine Paulo's probably, like, in terms of matchup difficulty, I would imagine he's taking the 5th hardest matchup on the court, like not like the least or the easiest matchup, I should say, on the court, relative, because of what they're asking him to do offensively, is what I would imagine. Like, especially while he was healthy, he probably has the highest usage, the highest creation load, like running the most offense through him. And we'll see kind of how that changes once he comes back, with Franz proving that he can hang too, that it should really be a 50-50 split, and they don't really need to test the waters with too many other point guards running offense, even though I have liked what Anthony Black has done with the pick and roll, being able to create good looks. But I think a big difference with this Franz push is kind of lessening the Jalen Suggs creation experiment a little bit as a point guard, and unleashing Franz as the point forward a little more often. And Suggs can still, do his thing from time to time. Still a versatile scorer. I think he's just been best kind of playing in that off-ball, 3-point, catch and shoot, attacking closeouts type of role this season, especially playing off, how hot Franz has been from all over the court.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So, by the way, I just looked up the rim protection numbers of Wendell and Isaac, and both of them were like 98 percentile or something. So yeah, like it's not the so definitely the Magic, like, and that's kind of tends to be the way rim protection works, right? It's generally centers and stuff, but you do have there are some like elite guards in terms of rim protection, like Derek White.
For sure.
Yeah.
I would imagine Suggs is up there too, if you have it in front of
And
you.
yeah, and Suggs' rim protection is in the 65 percentile,
Okay.
which for a guard is, and don't forget, this is 65 percentile of the whole league. So
Yeah.
when you consider a guard, and we actually have the ability to do this, I just don't have it up in front of me. But when you consider a guard, 65 percentile would probably be like closer to like 90 plus percentile for guards
Right.
on defense. So
yeah, and it's been noticeable this year with Suggs is his shot blocking. He's literally using his athleticism to time up chase down blocks in the half court. Where, like, I don't know if he's literally letting them go by because he's got that LeBron instinct of, I'm just going to time up the block as you go by me, but he's good for at least one of those half court chase down blocks a game, where normally that's like a full court transition. You're running back, sprinting back, and you're able to catch up. Suggs is just blocking drivers from behind, like, constantly. And like some of the all-time help defense guards, like a D Wade is the one that comes to mind, for the shot blocking guards, and Gary Payton or something. But there's so many tough ones out there. But yeah, I mean, Suggs has been noticeable. Like, I've been doing some streams with Charlie Cummings on the Swish Theory playback, and it's become almost a bit. It's like, oh, there's the Suggs chase down block of the game, because like we're just expecting it at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, think about how valuable that is to have like one of your guards to be able to kind of rim protect in that way, and to not be a liability. I mean, that's arguably one of the biggest reasons the Magic defense is like excellent, right? Is like, it's not just all the size all across the board, but it's like also having a guard like that. And it's the same thing with like the Celtics defense with Derek White, right? So
right, and I have the cleaning the glass metrics, just the 4 factors metrics, and right, I mean, it's literally been the same thing for the past 2 years. The Magic have ranked top 5 in forcing turnovers among the whole league, and that's been a reason they've been a top 5 defense. Last year they were second. In my opinion, a big reason is Suggs just being a pest on the perimeter, forcing turnovers, Jonathan Isaac cleaning everything up from down low, especially on the second unit. Like, imagine coming in on the second unit and thinking you're about to get an easy matchup, and then Jonathan Isaac checks in and the bench unit has to go score against him. It's like the last defender you want to see. So their ability to force turnovers. So, and like what I think is obviously important in the team building aspect is putting out length and strength, like you mentioned, but smart defenders that are active. And it doesn't have to be traditional roles anymore like it kind of used to in terms of what the coaches want out there and what the evaluators want out there. Like if you can pair super strong shot blocking guards and a little bit of a defensive anchor in the front court, you can get away with maybe a little less throughout the lineup, and maybe you have more playmaking and scoring from the wings, from the perimeter, like the Magic do, and they're almost building like some inverted roles that would have traditionally been the point guard setting everyone up, or the center's the only one that can rim protect, but not anymore. Do you have any other thoughts on you know overall why impact metrics seem to favor Franz? I mean, it seems like playmaking, shooting, defense, kind of hitting the main.
Yeah, we kind of hit all of that right there, right? Like, just like he had a higher playmaking talent, his 3-point shooting talent was a little bit higher, his gravity is a little bit higher, and then as I mentioned earlier, the matchup difficulty, the rim protection, they were both not great in the rim protection, but again, Franz is a little bit better. So like that's kind of the case right there, right?
Yeah.
And with like defense specifically, especially in the regular season, I think in the playoffs we don't know, like like if I was to make an opinion or educated guess, like I think perimeter defense probably goes up in importance in the playoffs, and maybe rim protection might go down. But one thing we do know in the regular season is like rim protection generally is very important in the regular season. Over 82 games, you want to be able to prevent teams from going to the basket, right? And because we're in a league where like the 3-point shot is a high variance shot, right? So you're still, despite all the threes and stuff like that being taken, you're still better off protecting the rim, and because like ultimately the shot at the rim is still the highest value shot in in the league, right? Despite all the extra threes now, it's still, rim shot is still the best shot. So generally rim protection tends to matter a little bit more in the regular season. So so
Yeah,
we kind
especially
of covered
for
why Franz there.
no doubt, and especially for half court defenses, and like you said, in the regular season, especially. I mean, I think rim protection is still like first and foremost important. Like you said, it's the most important shot in the half court. Is the layup the most efficient shot? So stopping those shots at the rim, especially over the aggregate, will help you the most to get stops and rank highly defensively. I think that's no doubt still as important as anything. And I love it when the center is still that defensive anchor, or at least a big man you can kind of rely on. If somebody gets past you on the perimeter, at least you got a Dwight Howard ready to clean it up behind you back in the day, or something like that. So hopping around the league, I thought we might hit on the Warriors. I mean, you are excited about some of the things they're doing here, like you mentioned before, how they're playing so many players, and they've got an 11-3 record. I mean, normally, you would see a 9-man rotation, especially come playoff time, like
Yep.
is probably a little more standard. So, maybe you extend it to 10 if you really like that second unit floor balance. But I think Kerr's up to 12 players a night.
Yeah. So actually, I've done a little research on this, and in the playoffs, generally, uh, I believe if you're looking at guys like playing over 25 minutes per game, it's about 6 players on each team, like the later, and especially in the later rounds. But like it's about 6 players playing over 25 minutes per game, and then playing over 20, it's like 7 players, and then over 15, it's 8. So, and then then you're kind of getting towards you're not really playing much, right? Or you're in garbage time or something. So, a playoff rotation is like generally at most 6 to 8 players, right? So, and the regular season, like I think teams will play more guys than that. But like you're looking at max what, like 9 or 10 at most. Like maybe a team will play an all bench lineup or something like that, right? So you might have like a 10-man rotation in the regular season, but you just rarely see a 12 or 13-man rotation. And I think the Warriors were at like 12-man rotation, and then Lindy Waters uh, kind of pushed his way into their rotation almost, and it's now 13. Although with Melton's injury, probably back down to 12. But you just don't see that, right? And actually, so I guess I'll ask you this question. One of the questions I have, and I can't really figure this out, is so to me, this 12-man rotation is like it's going to work in the regular season, especially because like having these waves of players you can throw in who are fresh, and especially with the way they play defense, they pressure the ball a little more. They're aggressive on defense, and so like to have waves and waves of people to kind of players to bring in, and then just constantly kind of be attacking on defense, right? And like that's something that'll work in the regular season, right? You have um like it's gonna, because especially in the regular season you have teams with more injuries, right? So if you're also thinking of a team that can withstand injuries, like the Warriors just lost Melton for the season, and they are still got like 12 players, right, in their rotation. So an injury like Melton is not as big of an issue in terms of like sustaining their regular season success as it might be for, as an example, Melton got injured with Philly last year, and everybody kind of forgot about that injury with Joel's injury, but that was a big loss for Philly in both the playoffs and the rest of the season. Like if they had him, they would have been a lot better. So, but then you go to Golden State now, and it's less of an issue with just so many guys. So, my question would be, in the playoffs, what we know with like rotations going down, is this something they can sustain in the playoffs? And that's something I have no idea. Like I can't just no idea. I can't answer that. I can't can't really grasp my head around whether they will or not.
Right. I mean, to me, like, yeah, I don't think I would be a little surprised if they still do it in the playoffs. Like, I think what you're saying about regular season effectiveness might be, why they're doing something like that. Like it's working now. You lose D'Anthony Melton, who was probably your most versatile guard defender and 3-point shooter option. So to try to make up for him, you throw a little bit more guys in the mix. You're able to make it up kind of on the aggregate in the regular season with the length and the effort that you talk about. Maybe you see if Moses Moody can kind of pop a little more, and maybe he elevates into a bigger role come playoff time, or even Pods, who Charlie Cummings was a big fan of his defense and playmaking as well when we were talking on the stream the other day. So that's one thing where it's like, I just don't think we've really seen it much in the playoffs, like that many players. And like what I guess I would compare it to the Magic a little bit in that they don't play 12 every night, but they do kind of go deep into the rotation when the matchup calls for it, based on injuries and availability. Like the second string team on the Magic has a really high net rating, or at least they did last season. They kept it intact no matter who got hurt in the first team, whether it was Paolo out for a few games, or Franz or Suggs missing time, or Wendell missing a ton of time. They would not pull anyone off that second unit because of how well they did against bench units. So they wanted to keep that intact, and they would dig in farther to the third team to start someone like Goga Bitadze. Or last year it was Chuma Okeke or Caleb Houston kind of starting on the wing and filling in. And, this year Anthony Black has popped up from third team last year to second team this year, spot starting for his second this year, and now he went back to that second unit to kind of maintain that balance. And Tristan da Silva has been pulled from the third team up to starting in Paolo's place to kind of replace a little bit of that scoring, connective offensive piece in the front court and still maintain that second unit balance. So like that's an example of like maybe going 10 deep because you love the second unit's balance, and you kind of have a bunch of injury replacement starters farther back on the bench because you have a 15-man roster out here. So you might as well, fill it with guys you think can spot start or whatever you might need if you're worried about certain injuries. But in terms of the Warriors, yeah, I mean, I think it like we kind of touched on, I think it will continue to work for the regular season to a degree because you can kind of feel out guys. You can, like you said, instead of using up fouls, maybe you're using up that first burst of energy that everyone kind of has for a few minutes. And it sort of reminds me of the piece Tom Haberstroh wrote of Delano Banton. I might have got that name wrong, for Chauncey Billups on the Blazers. How he was kind of using him as like a closer in the fourth quarter, where he would wait all game to play him, and then have these fresh legs to throw in a heat check guy in the fourth quarter. And I don't know if they've kept up on it the whole season, but it gave them something of a push where he would basically bring them back into games, maybe even secure the win with some explosiveness and hot shooting just by keeping him fresh for the fourth quarter. So that's an interesting alternate way as well to kind of like use different guys in different roles that you might not normally see. But what's exciting about the Warriors to me is they're playing like the good old Warriors of like a decade ago. Like we're watching like a scheme of Steph playing MVP ball, Draymond playing Defensive Player of the Year type of anchor, Wiggins and Kuminga, big length on the wings, and then Buddy Hield has been red hot so far through 14 games. In my opinion, one of the best fits he could have asked for, playing in a scheme that really prioritizes 3-point shooting and relocation and playing fast. And he's shooting 45% on 8 threes a game, while Steph is shooting 44% on 9 threes a game. Like just these nuclear numbers.
Yeah.
Cosplaying the new Splash Bros in town. So that's a big one to me. And I think they'll continue to kind of play who's hot or where the matchup indicates. But it's hard to believe they're going to stick with 12 men every single night, especially in the playoffs. But maybe in the regular season, especially because it's working for them. And they do probably want, if it's working for them and they can get away with playing Steph and Draymond just a little less to reduce that injury risk, I mean, they're gonna want to do that for how many seasons and time they've lost with big injuries to those guys, and Steph especially with the ankles.
Yeah, and that's a big thing in terms of like if you can play Steph and Draymond less, like that's helping save them for the playoffs, right? Which is where they're going to need both of them more than necessarily in the regular season. I think for me with the Warriors too, I kind of wonder. I mean, I guess this is the question everybody has in terms of like the top end talent. Do they need like a trade to kind of further strengthen the top end talent that you normally see that wins out in the playoffs? But then they have won all their championships with a somewhat similar structure. Although I will say this team, I know the 14-15 and the 15-16 teams, and those teams were labeled strength in numbers, but I don't really believe that they were. Like, I mean, if we're being honest, was like Steph and Draymond were both top 10 players back then, right? So, and now it's it's really a strength in numbers team. Like to me, this is like the first time they've truly been a strength in numbers team, and so it'll be interesting to see if like not only does the playing 12 guys, whether they do that in the playoffs, but like whether they can kind of keep the same strategy in the playoffs of like bring in like all sorts of guys, and like 10, even if it's 10 guys or something, because most teams play like 6 or 7 guys in the playoffs, right? So I mean, maybe if you're playing 10 guys in the playoffs and another team's playing like their starters like 40 plus minutes, maybe your guys are more fresh, and I mean, maybe that somehow works in playoffs. I would probably be a little skeptical, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think Wiggins is kind of returned a little bit to his
Yes.
best self. Like the defense, he had a great matchup. He seems to be in Luka's head a little bit after some of their playoff matchups. He has a good matchup advantage there with the build and the length against Luka, which matters in the playoffs when you have a guy that can give the other guy a star. Just throw him off a little bit is really all you could ask for. And like we've been mentioning about this lineup, they have 6 guys, not including DeAnthony Melton, playing over 10 minutes a game after their top six. So like that's just is wild how many minutes these
That's
guys
pretty crazy. Yeah.
are getting here. And yeah, they might not have like a Sean Livingston off the bench or a Andre Iguodala kind of stepping into that, embracing a smaller role with a high impact guy, but you know they seem to be doing it with a lot of defense, a lot of length, and a lot of effort and a lot of energy. And if you, to me, like you flank a nuclear offensive scoring threat, flank him with defense and length and high field, that just good decision makers who know how to use that length without fouling to force turnovers and get stops around him. And on top of that, actually be able to play finish around that scoring gravity. And as long as Buddy keeps shooting like this, he's a natural replacement type of 3-point shooter in that role. Obviously, he'll never be Klay Thompson to Golden State, but he might be a better shooter right this second, or at least as good as they were getting last year. So I mean that's all they can really ask for. And yeah, I mean, as far as a trade, I just don't know how many possibilities they have. Like they had like some rumors over the summer with Paul George or Lauri Markkanen, where they had these deals, but those deals I don't think even can really happen anymore because of different rules in like Markkanen's extension hit, and now he can't be traded to the summer. And Paul George is obviously in Philadelphia now, so I don't think anything could happen there. Maybe in a few months if something blows up, maybe.
I
There's a
mean,
lot going up in
yeah,
Philly right now. But maybe
maybe Philly.
yeah, I mean, and beyond that, maybe they'd prefer kind of what they're getting out of Wiggins and Kuminga this year. But it is hard to turn down Paul George in theory. So we won't rule it out. But
Yeah.
I don't have any fake trades ready. I mean, we could hop on Fanspo and break out the machine, but they just don't have too many actual tradable contracts. Like I think it's like DeAnthony Melton can be traded for something, and then like Guy Santos, or Guy Santos, however you pronounce his first name. Not exactly sure, but I think he has a tradable deal. I'm just not sure how many like tradable contracts and actual like players they have to move, unless they're willing to make that big deal with like moving on from Wiggins and Kuminga, Tracy Jackson Davis, some big kind of lengthy forwards in their front court who, I just don't know if they're ready to package that, because that kind of sacrifices what has worked for them this season and goes all in on one more guy. So, I mean, it's a good point that like that's normally what wins championship, is being a little star heavy and top heavy, and still having a good enough team and rotation to play 8 or 9 guys around them. And so, if you have 12 playable guys and you can turn it into 3 stars and 9 guys, maybe they do it for the playoff run, or maybe they stick to what's been working for them. I mean, that's the big question.
Yeah. And I don't think, I mean, we were kind of joking about Paul George because things are kind of going south in Philly right now, but I don't actually think they can trade him this year, if I'm not mistaken. So even if Philly did want to blow it up because of their really, really bad start and things seem to be going poorly there, I don't think they can actually trade him. But yeah.
I wasn't sure if there was like a December rule, like maybe once new signing after December. I wasn't sure what was going on with the rules for him. But I mean, at the moment, Golden State's +5 in point differential, 12th on offense, 3rd on defense, high efficiency, top 10, great above average rebounding, 11th, best defense in the league in terms of shooting efficiency, and 6th on forcing turnovers. So like they're getting stops. They're forcing a lot of turnovers. They're scoring efficiently themselves. They're just playing better ball than a lot of guys. I mean, +9 net rating, 11 and 3. There's not much reason that should fall off, unless somebody just stops shooting, like Buddy and Steph just forget how to shoot or something, which ain't really happening anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, with Buddy, is he still shooting like? I remember he was shooting like near 50%.
Yeah, he's 45% on threes, but I mean, so he could regress a little. It has only been 15 games, but
his
just the perfect role.
But and honestly, like nobody wants to say it, but he's been an upgrade on Clay from last year. Like,
Yeah,
um,
that's what I was hinting at before. Is like I don't. The defense is kind of slipped for both, but like efficiency wise, like I
yeah,
think he's a little more reliable right now at this point in their careers, and
yeah,
nothing
at least based on
respect
where
for
Clay
Clay.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it stinks what injuries have kind of zapped him of who he used to be, and still like a good basketball player that's exciting to watch. Rooting for Clay, just looking at the numbers this year.
yeah, yep. And yeah, and if anybody wants to plug in some trades, we actually have LeBron up in the Fanspo trade machine, and we're actually hoping to get our multi-year LeBron version up in there. And you may see some other stuff from BBall Index popping up on Fanspo, including possibly player profiles and everything else. So yeah, just a little hint of things to come, and yeah,
Well, hey, I like that tease at the end. Something
yeah,
could be in the brew. I like it. Well, get your fake trades up. Follow Krishna on Twitter and at the B-Ball Index. If you have anything you want to plug, you can follow him at Narsu3 on Twitter, and you can find all his great work. Shout out to the B-Ball Index and Tim, one of the greatest ats. I always laugh because of I always think of the Impractical Jokers scene with with his handle, because like I was just watching Impractical Jokers one day, and like they just shout out his handle like as a joke, like Cranjus McBasketball, like as like a funny fake name that they're trying to think of, and then I look it up, it's like it's just Tim's username on Twitter, so it's comedic gold, but obviously does some great work beyond just that and building out the site. Shout out B-Ball Index and Jacob Goldstein back in the day with PIPM there. Had a lot of fun visualizing their data myself, creating some data viz for them a few years back. So if you want to find a cool website with a lot of different tools to kind of figure out who's doing what, who's good at what, they have just a ton of different rankings and ratings to look at, and really good job at kind of like classifying everything into different individual skills and naming it to familiar archetypes, and visualizing it well, grading it well, and then it all comes together into one big LeBron impact metric that Krishna has developed here. So I want to thank you for hopping on the pod. Really appreciate you taking the time, and always fun to talk hoops. We'll have to do it again sometime.
yeah, definitely. Thank you.
No doubt. Have a good one, Krishna.
You too.
With Ryan.
Learning Basketball is a Swiss Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.